All right, so we have a nice kick and snare clap pattern. So now we're gonna add cymbals to kind of spice up our drums. So I'm gonna go over some hi-hat options, some ride options, a crash cymbal, and then some pattern variations with this. So let's get right into it. So I'm back in our project now, and what I'm going to do is add a new track. And what I'm gonna do is just open up the drum synth. Now you could go into hats and cymbals, and I'm hitting Command K to open this up and mess around. That's a crash. It's a ride. Hat. I personally don't think all of these are that great. And even though we could mess around with it and try to make something, I think, passable, I think there are quicker and easier ways to get a nice cymbal pattern. The first thing I'm going to do to show you is Ultrabeat. Okay, so Ultrabeat is an older plugin, but I still think it's very useful, especially for cymbals. So I'm going to go right here, and if I click right here, Ultrabeat drum machine, I should say, stereo. If I click here, this kind of looks super crazy and fancy, and you can create all sorts of things using Ultrabeat. But what I'm going to do is actually just find a preset, so drum kit, and let's say I'm going to do, let's see, it doesn't really matter, you can go for whatever, but I actually want to find like almost like a rock and roll drum kit, because those cymbals I think sound the best. Let's try down tempo kit. And if you hit play, it'll show you all the samples, so you can quickly do that. And I see right here, that's a hat, and I'm realizing I don't like that one, so I'm going to try to find a different one. Let's try Indie Live. All right, so I like these hi-hats, but I don't necessarily like the crash, which is fine. We can find another crash. So what I can do is either edit the notes in the MIDI editor, or I can edit them here in Ultrabeat. So I'm going to click on these notes right here to get rid of the kicks and get rid of the snare. And then whatever the snare shadow is. So if I play this, I like it. I'm going to try to add some variation. So I'm going to delete that note. Maybe do this one every other. Let's see what this sounds like so far. Yeah, I like that a lot. So I'm going right here. So I think that's a great place to start. Let's see if I can get some open hats here. That might be a good variation to do. So that'll just play. But what I actually want to do is I want more control. So now that I've messed around with the drum machine, I'm going to change the size of this just because it's a little too big. I'm going to click right here at the bottom where it says pattern. It's kind of hard to see. But if I click this here, then it creates that MIDI region, which then I can go edit more, which I'd recommend. So let's just copy this a couple of times and see how it goes with our drum kit pattern so far. I think it goes great, actually. You can do whatever you want. You can mess around with this. You can have the notes go faster, slower. Doesn't matter. But I do think this is going pretty good so far. But what I would like to do is actually separate this into two different tracks, okay? Because I want control over every single different sound. And since we have two different sounds right here, we have like the open or the closed hi-hat and the more open hi-hat. they're two different sounds. So I'm going to separate these. And you don't have to separate these, but I like having the most control. And the way that we're going to have the most control is by making a new track. Now, I made a new track by hitting Command D. That's duplicate. So I'm going to drag this on here. And I'll have this be the open hat, or mid. I'll call it mid hat, because we might use the open hat later. This will be closed hat. So what I'll do here for the closed hat is open this up, and then click on all of the open hats, or the mid hats, I should say, and then delete them. And then here, I'm going to do the same thing, but delete all of the closed hats. So I've selected these by just hitting this and delete. So I think that's pretty good so far. So another thing that I think is a good thing to have in your tool belt is to add a ride cymbal on the offbeat. So I actually know of a good ride cymbal that if I go into, I'll make a new track. Doesn't really matter because I'm going to pick a preset. So if I go to electronic drum kit, I believe this after party, which I just had a problem with earlier, I think it's this one. So if I go to this note right here, this E, yeah, that's it. I think that's a great sound. I think I use this in a lot of them, a lot of my tracks, actually. So what I'm going to do is create a MIDI region, and that is E flat 2, or D sharp 2, they'll call it. So right here, ride, after party. Yeah, that's it. So like that. Now, I'm going to get to deleting all these extra sends that I don't want, but what I do want to show you guys is instead of having this be a MIDI file, I can have it be an audio file like this. So this is what it's going to sound like. Whoops, I'll just play this. So what I'm going to do is, similar to the kick, I'm going to bounce this in place. So I'll just do a new one over here. And I'll delete these notes, except for one. Oh, and I'm just realizing why this has been sounding louder, because the Ultrabeat is on. I need to turn that off for, okay, this one's off already. So if let's play this. There we go, that sounds better. I was like, those cymbals are sounding a little bit louder than I thought, but it's because the Ultrabeat was on. So with this ride, what I'm going to do, back to this, I'm going to bounce this in place. I'm going to call this ride cymbal. Okay, I'm going to have normalization on here. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to cancel. I'm going to make sure all of these other effects are off. It seems like there are no other effects except for this EQ, which I am going to turn off. And this DMD is Drum Machine Designer, I believe. I don't really use this view often. You totally can. But anyway, I want to make sure that I just have the clean sample. Now I'm going to go here, bounce in place. I will normalize it. I will leave the source because I can edit that after. So ride cymbal. And then, yeah, this is all good. So I'll hit OK. And whoops, I didn't even want to do this. So what I'm going to do is, now I just have this cymbal, right? It might be louder because I normalized it. Yep, good thing I turned the volume down. So it's super loud, and it's great. And I'm going to add this to my Apple Loops library, ride cymbal, and key, I'll do none. Like I said, scale, any. And it's a single one shot. There we go. So I added this ride cymbal. So I often do that with samples that I enjoy. So if I find a sample in Logic, I'll just bounce it in place and add it to my loops. So then I go to my loops, and then it's just there. Okay, so I just have this cymbal. I think I've honestly added this one already. Yep, ride and ride cymbal. I bet you these are the same thing. Anyway, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this entire after party. And then I'm going to add this ride cymbal. So like that. And it's longer than I'd like it to be, so I'm going to shorten it. And I am going to do that fade tool trick just to make sure that we don't have any unnecessary clicking. Probably not going to make a difference, but just in case. All right, so now let's mess around with our mix. Oh, I totally messed that pattern up. Sorry, you might have noticed that. Here, that's where it needs to go. So I can even make this shorter. And I am going to reduce this fade. I can either click this, or since I have multiple tracks, I'm going to go to the region up here and then turn this fade out way down like that. So let's see what this sounds like. I'm going to make this longer because it kind of sounds unnatural. There we go. That sounds much better. All right, now let's actually get this pattern correct. All right, now the last thing I want to do is check on my panning with the cymbals. Often you'll have some of the cymbals more towards the left and some of the cymbals more towards the right. So let's see what these are looking like. So if I just have these, it seems like these are more to the right, just by a little bit. So I could move these to the right a little bit. Let's say 12. And then I could take this ride cymbal and move this to the left. This cymbal, I believe, is, yeah, this is just mono, or at least it's not panned either way. So if I pan this to the left, and what I do want is I want them to be balanced overall. It's okay if one's a little bit more to the left and one's a little bit more to the right, but I don't want it all to be on one side or leaning towards one side. So if I look at this, my meter right here, now it kind of seems a little out of whack to the left, so maybe I'll just turn this down. I also might need to turn this ride cymbal down a little bit. So now I feel like I messed things up. So I'm gonna go back to 12, minus 12, I should say. Turn this up a little bit. There we go. So right there, that looks pretty even. And it's not a huge difference. Like sometimes I'd pan things wider, but this is just slight. So let's hear what we have so far. So right now, I think this is pretty good. I think if anything, we might need to adjust the levels on the kick and the snare, but I will do that later once we're actually mixing it in with other stuff. The last thing I'm going to do is add a crash. You don't need a crash cymbal, but I think sometimes it adds emphasis to certain parts of your track. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did. I'm going to go software instrument, and then I'll go to setting, electronic drum kit, and let's try to find... let's do deep tech, or maybe drop kick. And by the way, some of these have some good samples. I don't like that. And you'll kind of get to know which MIDI notes or which drum synth, like this C1, that's almost always the kick, snare, toms, and then the cymbals, and so on. You'll get to learn that the more you use Logic. Anyway, let's try deep tech. All right, I don't like those either. So I'm actually feeling less into this method. So let's actually change this. We'll go to just a normal drum kit. Maybe we will let's do Southern Cal. Thank goodness for autosave. My project just crashed, but autosave is a fantastic thing. It saved me so many times. Make sure that you are saving, but I would also recommend that you have autosave on. Anyway, so what I was doing before autosave saved my life, because the project crashed, is I changed this to a drum kit, which I picked Southern Cal, and thank goodness it didn't crash there. I turn this bus off. That's a great crash cymbal, I think. So you can use that. I also found another crash that I think I saved. So if I call it crash, that's a good one. I don't really remember where I found this, but I definitely did the same thing that I did. I used some sort of crash that I enjoyed, and then I saved it as a loop so I wouldn't have to keep finding it. So anyway, if you wanted to, you can... Oops. Let's see. That's a good one. The one thing I don't like about what I just did is it is panned. I don't necessarily want my crash panned, but we can have it panned. Either way, I am going to use this crash. So I'll go down here. So this one's called crash left. I'm wondering if there's a crash right. There is. I wonder what it sounds like together. I'm going to turn this velocity all the way up. Oh, I love that. Now it's obviously too loud. I'm going to hit I to get the inspector up. So I'm going to turn this down, but I think that's great. Still probably a little too loud. All right, there we go. I think I'm going to bounce this as a file, just because I would rather do that. Sometimes the MIDI is a little bit strange, so I'm going to bounce this in place. My combined crash, and let's hear what this sounds like. Sorry, it's too loud. All right, so I'm going to delete this. You could keep it if you want, but I'm going to keep this. Okay, I'm going to undo what I just did because I did not allow this enough time to ring out. So I'm going to keep this as 4 bars. Wow, that rings out for quite some time. So I'll do 6 bars. I'll bounce this in place. And this will be my crash. So I'm going to delete this crash. And you can save this to loops. I'm actually going to save this to my loops because I might use this in another project. So I'll add this to Apple Loops. I'll do SoCal double crash. One shot. Key doesn't matter. There we go. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I don't need this to ring out for this long. I'm going to mute this. Turn this way down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade. I'll cut this to 4 bars. I'm going to fade this. I'm hitting Command and clicking. Yeah, I like that. So I'm fading out the last part instead of just letting it ring, just because it's probably not going to be as predominant until that, or except for that very beginning part. So anyway, here's what I have so far. So I'm very happy with what we have so far. Just a couple of other things that you could do. If you didn't really care about having as much control, you could just try to find an Apple loop. So go to All Packs and either search hats and get some hi-hats, Now, I don't have all of these downloaded, so you could download them if you wanted, but like, turn this down. So that's one thing you could do. Or you could search the word topper. If you do topper, it typically has hats, but sometimes it has a snare, which messes with me. So this is why I don't necessarily recommend this. So that might be an easier way or a quicker way to get something that you like. I like having more control, so I don't mind spending more time on it. And then the last thing that I'd recommend is actually using a drummer track. So the drummer tracks are great. And before I do this, I'm going to save by hitting Command S. Even though the autosave saved my life, it's just good to do. I'm going to add the drummer track. And I'll do rock, but I can change that if I want to. So what I could do is I will mute all of these. And then I'm going to turn on the hats, and that's it. And it's just going to, and then I can kind of adjust it. And the fills are on. That's going to be the next thing we go over, but I'm going to turn those all the way off. And if I wanted to, I could, let's say I'll leave them right here, and maybe I'll adjust it like that. So that's another quick way to get something great. If you wanted to, you could actually take this drummer track, which is kind of like the artificial intelligence or something, whatever it is. It's really just playing MIDI notes. So what you could do is command click this on a normal track, and I just happen to have this Southern Cal track up, a normal drum track, and then it gives me all the MIDI notes. So I can, if I say, oh, I like most of this, but I want to adjust this, I can just drag this in and then take this and make my changes. So this is what this sounds like. I will, yeah. So you could do that for one aspect. I've done this lots of times. It's a great way to get something quick for cymbals. So anyway, I'm going to keep the original one that we worked on, but I just wanted to show you guys some other techniques of getting cymbals and hi-hats that are really going to be great for your specific application. So anyway, now we are done with cymbals. Next thing we're going to be doing is moving on to variations and fills.